Hello everyone, today we continue learning Python and today we'll talk about common Django problems. So let's start. So I made a post in my Telegram channel about an hour ago and a lot of people said that, so the post was, or the poll was like that. So what are you using? Django, Flask, Fast API or Socket? So a lot of people chose Socket, but the most popular response was Django. So Django, again, is a web framework for those of you who don't know, and today I'll talk about common problems in Django. And I also want to say that I have a new Udemy course which tells you about common problems in IT industry, and that video shows you the gist of that course. So it's not about Django, that course is not about Django, it's applicable for, or applicable, so you can apply it for to every I don't know, framework, library, programming language, to almost every programming language which has classes. Well, it's very unified course that tells you about common problems in the IT industry and then tells you about their solutions. So yeah, if you want to check that course out, go down to the description and you'll find a promo code right there. So yeah, promo code is only for 29 days, so be sure to grab it if you can. Okay, so now let's talk about common Django problems. And what I want to do is just go through all of the files in my Django project. So if you haven't seen and again, if you don't know Django, you can watch that video, but maybe it's better for you to somehow get in touch with Django. So somehow to know Django better, because Django is a really complicated thing. And today I'll talk about that. So first of all, let me start with Django YouTube. So Django YouTube, it's like the name of my project, of my folder, and thus it's the name of my project folder. So you know what I mean. The folder itself where everything is located, and the folder where general settings are located. So let's start. First of all, SGI and SGI-PY. So those are, well, VSGI, as far as I know, S is a server. I forgot the extended version of those words, but SGI and VSGI are very important for every Python programmer, because those things allow you to really make your project work in the production environment. Because if you just use Python managed PRN server, it's not that great. And that problem is not as popular as other ones, but that's related to the new people in Django and in Flask, in almost any programming language, in almost any HTTP related thing in Python. Yeah, so try to learn about VSGI, SGI. So VSGI, WSGI is more popular right now, but both of them are great. There are a lot of different things about them, so try to learn about them. I'll make a video on one or two, maybe on VSGI, because I'm more familiar with that. But yeah, just do your research before you put your project in production. But of course, in your development environment, you can use Python managed PY run server. So to run your Django server in development environment. Again, never run it anywhere else. Only on your laptop or somewhere where you test things, so when you really need to quickly set up a Django server. Okay, but not in production, because that's awful. Now let's go to settings.py. So the first problem in settings.py, I'll show you it right here. So what do you have right here? What is the problem with that file? So I'll give you like, I don't know, 1 second, 2 seconds. Okay, so what is the problem with that file? So the problem is right here. The problem is right here, maybe. The problem is right here and right here. So what are, and right here, of course. So what are the problems with settings.py? Of course, is that we don't use environment variables. In every project where you have settings, and that's in every project, you should or you must use environment variables. I talked about them in the settings and keys video, because environment variables are really important. So when we see, for example, secret key equals to a simple string, what's happening right here? We expose that string to everyone. And in Django, by default, as you can see, I created that project and I never touch settings except for the logging that I set up in the previous video of Django or RAM optimization. So all of the settings are not located inside of environment variables. That means that if we put those settings on GitHub, everybody can see them. So it's very common for my subscribers. So I have GitHub, subscribe. The link is in the description. It's very common for my subscribers to have some public projects. And I have those public projects as well. And I'm sure you can find a lot of tokens, a lot of passwords, a lot of nasty things inside of those projects. For example, Telegram, I have a Telegram channel, so yeah, subscribe to it as well. A lot of ads today, but in my it's very common for my subscribers to make Telegram bots. So that's one of the big that's one of the big topics on my channel, and because of that, a lot of them really want to show the world what they made. So they have a bot with a token that they should never tell to anybody, so like a password to their Telegram bot, and they just put it on GitHub and they store their tokens inside of raw string variables. So that's obviously bad, and if you want to get deeper in that, so deeper in settings, environment variables, then I have a video on that topic. It will explain everything, why is that bad, what's the problem, so watch it. But one rule, use environment variables. Okay, so the next problem, big problem, is not knowing what your settings do, or not having the right settings. That's what I meant. So not knowing what your settings actually do, for example, what debug means, what allowed hosts means, it's bad. But when you don't use the right settings, it's awful. So for example, if I'll use that in my allowed hosts, it depends on my architecture and environment, but typically that's very, very bad in 99% of the cases. Then, for example, if you put your project into production, but you don't have some security settings, for example, because in Django we have two types of settings. Well, actually one type, but let me explain. We have global settings and local settings. So local settings are the ones that we set. There is no like local settings name for them, but global settings are the defaults for Django. That's what I meant. And a lot of defaults, so if you don't have your variables reassigned in your settings.py file, a lot of defaults take their place. And therefore you can have some nasty bugs with those defaults. So before you roll anything in production, check that you have all the settings that you need. Okay, so yeah, that's actually it. The next problems are really, yeah, there are a lot of problems with Django that I can see. Like, for example, having only one default database, having wrong password validators, but yeah, that's less common problem. Having static URL, or yeah, having not static URL, but not having, yeah, static URL, yeah, static is alright. But for example, storing your static in the same server as you store your Django in, so in one place. That's really bad, but typically for settings, that's all I've got. But also, there is one thing that I want to tell you. A lot of programmers tend to have a lot of variables in their settings. They say, like, I have 500 variables, I have 700 variables, so I can't put all of them into one file. So I'll split my file for different environments. For example, for development environment, for test environment, and for production environment. What's the problem with that? Obviously, when you have three different files instead of one, so settings.py prod, settings.py dev, settings.py test, for example, you have three files to look after. So you can't put, for example, salt key setting into one file, you need to put it in three files. And the problem is that a lot of settings, again, can take the place of other environments. For example, if you're using I don't know, debug as true in your development environment, but you forgot to put it in production environment, then you may use debug environment. It's not as common, but still it's a big problem. So I think that having one file, and actually I had a section about settings and a lot of lectures about why different files for settings are bad and why they may be great. But I think that for 99% of the projects, having one file for the settings, so not splitting your settings into different environments, but rather using environment variables for different environments. For example, debug is, I don't know, debug is env, then debug. And of course you need to put boolean, but yeah, it depends on the library that you are using. So yeah, for example, environ from debug. You can use that instead of having production, test, and dev. But if you have 700 variables, so typically 99% of the projects don't have 700 variables, but if your settings do, then of course it may be a good thing to split your settings files into different environments. But in 99% of the cases, it's better to have only one file, because it's just easier for you to look after that file. And of course, if you want to get deeper into that, go to my course, because yeah, there is a lot of things that I can explain about settings, but the time is, yeah, how much time? Oh, 10 minutes already. Okay, so yeah, that's one big problem. The next problem about settings is really having a lot of settings files. Not a lot of settings files for different environments. So if you have, for example, Django YouTube prod settings, dev settings, and another settings, of course, it's better to put them in a separate folder. But if you have your settings in one general folder general folder like Django YouTube, you know what I mean, when you have general settings, when you have all of that stuff. If you put all of your three settings files inside of your general folder, it's great. But there is a problem if you put a lot of settings for different applications in Django, and actually in any environment, in any programming language. Because as I said in my settings and keys videos, what you should do is put all your settings into settings.py file or settings.js, settings, I know, it really depends, but you know what I mean, to put them into one place. Because if your settings are located into different places, for example, you have products settings.py. Why do you want to have product settings? Why? You can put all your settings related to the products inside of your settings.py file, inside of your Django YouTube. You should never ever use different settings use settings files for different, or how do I say it correctly, for every application. You should never use separate settings files. So you should never put your settings files inside of your applications. Yeah, that's what I meant. That's a really, really big problem. Okay, so yeah, put everything inside of settings.py. And the next problem is really contradictory with that one, because as I said, you need to put all of your settings into one place, one or three places for different environments. So yeah, it's a one place. Don't put your settings all over your project. However, put everything that is related to your application inside of your application, except for settings. What do I mean by that? A lot of people, and we are going to urls.py, a lot of people use that approach. For example, we have views.py in our products. Let's go right here. Oh, it's spoiler right here. So for example, I have get all products view. What do you have? We are doing something like that in our general urls.py. For example, products slash, I don't know, get all. Then we have what? We have products, product views, and so on. So we put raw views inside of our global directories, inside of our global files, inside of our URLs files as well, because that's the most common problem that I saw with wrong architecture or with wrong folder app structure, or app structure, app structure in Django. Because in Django there is a great approach that what you need to do is put everything except for the settings that is related to your project inside of that project folder. Why? Because if, for example, our project will grow, our business grows, we have a lot of money, and we have a big amount of load coming towards us. So high load, a lot of requests, a lot of queries, and so on. We maybe want to split our big monolith project into microservices. I think that a lot of you heard about microservices. So yeah, that's a really common approach nowadays. A lot of people use them incorrectly, but yeah, that's a common approach. So if you want to put your project, one big monolith project, so again, microservices is when you have different, for example, applications when we're talking about Django. So for example, products applications, user applications, I don't know, orders applications in different servers, in different programs, and they talk to each other using HTTP calls, and no, API calls, just API calls of any kind. That's microservices, and it's better. It's somehow better, but somehow it's worse. So yeah, there are a lot of things to consider. It's just an architecture, and as for everything in IT, there are advantages and there are disadvantages for that type. But if you want to spend or to split your project, one big project, into microservices, or for example, you need to copy some logic from your app to another project, which is not related to your current project that you're working in. For example, you have a work project and the same thing that you wrote during your work is required for your, I don't know, home pet project. What you can do is put everything inside of your app, everything related to your app, again, except for the settings, inside of your app directory. Why? Because then what you can literally do is get the directory and put it anywhere that you want. And you have all the views, ORM queries, I don't know, everything that is related to your products app inside of your products app. You will not have anything outside of that app somewhere in other apps, in other places. What you have is one application that works, all of the logic, all of the code inside of that specific folder. That's why putting everything inside of your inside of your application folder is better. And returning to the urls.py, what do we have right here? Products get all. That's bad. Of course, we need to use include function. If you don't know about it, then read about it, because yeah, there are a lot of things that we need to talk about today, and I don't want to extend or enlarge that video too much. Okay, so that is one problem with URLs. Okay, let's move to another problem with GI. Okay, never put run server in production, learn how to deploy Django projects. Django has a very cool documentation, use it. Next problem, or the next item inside of our project tab, is products. So that's our application. Well, the next problem is not as common as it is as the others, but it's just for the beginner. So if you are a beginner, never put everything inside of one app, because apps in Django are designed to execute one job. For example, products app does everything that is related to the products. Users app does everything that is related to the users, and so on. So create apps for different aims. Yeah, that's it. Then what we have right here, migrations. So migrations, and let me move to the models.py, because those are connected. So migrations, SQL migrations, and models.py, again, the worst part of the Django, the best and the worst parts of the Django. So why do I'm saying that? Because Django ORM is literally the best ORM that I have ever used. It's easy. It's literally the best from my point of view. Tortoise ORM is really great. SKAlchemy is really great. PV is really great. Well, Tortoise ORM is an ancestor of Django ORM, but yeah, a lot of ORMs in Python are great. Prisma is great if we are talking about JavaScript. Mongoose is Mongoose an ORM? Oh, it's ODM, object document mapping, but yeah, there are a lot of great things, and Django ORM is exceptional. However, there is one problem with Django ORM. What's that? When we're talking about Django ORM, it's really easy to use, but when we are using it and when we are seeing it as an easy ORM, we forget that we need to optimize it. We forget that we need to put a lot of other additional functions. We need to call other additional functions. We need to put indexes, for example. Yeah, a lot of problems with Django ORM. So it's really easy to use if you are a beginner, but when you look at Django ORM as someone with the experience, you see that Django ORM has a lot of problems. I'm not saying that I have a lot of experience with Django ORM. Well, I have it, but yeah, I don't flex. I don't have well, I have a lot of experience with Django ORM. Yeah, that's my best ORM, I think. But yeah, when you're looking at it as someone with the experience, you see that there are a lot of problems with Django ORM, potential problems with Django ORM that you can fix as a developer. So those are not the problems with the code. Of course, you have problems with the code, with the structure, with SQL creation, but those problems are literally just problems that every developer can fix. For example, price, in our case, price. Why don't we put validation to the price field? Because price should never be lower than 0. Indexes. If, for example, I know that I will use my title as the main search term for my product, why can't I put index right here? Yeah, that's just it. Know your Django ORM. Because there are a lot of things. If you don't know, you can literally translate every field inside of your model on fly. So you can have a model that will have its field translated. So if you, for example, work in a company where you have, for example, English-speaking people and Spanish-speaking people, what you can do is literally just make one great thing. Translation for Spanish speakers and translation for English speakers. And there are a lot of possibilities with Django ORM. So yeah, that's just one of them. So yeah, Django ORM is really, really great. Learn it, know it, use it. Yeah, but that's what I want to say. A lot of problems with Django ORM come up because people don't know how to use it properly. Yeah, that's just one big problem. Know how to use Django ORM, and that's why I'm making my Django ORM optimization series on my YouTube channel. So yeah, watch it, learn, create, improve, adapt. That's what I want to say. Okay, another big problem with Django ORM is that if you don't, well, it's not a big problem, but it's somehow an advice, more like an advice. If you're using something that is very common for other Django users, for example, Postgres. Postgres is the main database of Django, or Oracle, or MySQL. What you can do is search for your specific database extensions, because there are a lot of libraries for Django that provide extensions for different libraries or for different databases. So when you have, for example, Postgres, you can have gene indexes. So indexes for text. They are called gene indexes. So yeah, gene, different type of indexes. And of course, you can create them in raw Django. Well, you can create them like literally using migrations and using run SQL in them. But it's really beneficial when you have that another layer that helps you to work with specific data structures, specific things. For example, if we're talking about MySQL, it will be different engines. For example, memory engine, InnoDB engine, and so on. So yeah, extensions are really great. You can use it, but that's not a big problem because yeah, you can go without them. But that's an advice that you can use extensions for your database. The next thing that I want to talk about is Json Field, because Json Field I just hate it. So there is, if you don't know, there is Json Field in any database right now, in SQL database as well. I'm not talking about NoSQL like MongoDB, Cassandra. I'm talking about SQL databases. There is a Json Field inside of them. But what's the problem with the Json Field? The problem is that Json Field is just garbage collector for every model in Django. There is no model that I have never seen a model that really uses Json Field. It's just a garbage collection. Literally, just a garbage collection. So what do people say when you have Json Field? So we'll use that information later. We use that data later. It's a database. And for every row, for every record, you have a JSON for 20 megabytes, for 1 gigabyte, because Json Field you can constrain that field sizes and so on, but typically it's not, there is no constraint for Json Field in Django. So yeah, there is constraint, but like you put anything that you want inside of the Json Field, and you are thinking that okay, we'll use it later, but of course you don't optimize your queries. So every time you query anything from the database, again, select all, scan without indexes, of course, because you don't have indexes, who needs them? You get the Json Field, and Json Field is just literally a garbage collector. Never use Json Field until you can justify why you, not just justify with the words like we'll use it later, really justify why you need the Json Field inside of your database, inside of your SQL database. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Okay, next let's go to the tests PY, and of course the best or the most popular problem with tests is that you don't have tests. Yeah, well, as for me, I am trying to write tests for everything that I'm coding, but there is a problem in structure for my tests. So I think that tests or test structure is the weakest part of my programming, except for the algorithms, because I know algorithms, I know how they work, but when we're talking about complex math, complex algorithms, I have no idea what's even happening right here. But yeah, I think that test structure is my biggest or my weakest programming skill, if I can say it like that. Yeah, but for a lot of people, test the biggest problem is that their tests just simply do not exist. Yeah, but even if you have a very awful structure for your tests, but you have your tests, that's a one big advantage for you. Of course, you can improve your structure, and I am trying to do that, but yeah, have tests. It will be better for you in the future and for you today. Like, literally, tests are awesome. Well, they are, yeah, again, I have a lecture or a section on that in my new course, but like, yeah, tests. Okay, they are not as amusing as other parts of programming, but yeah, they are required, they are essential, and they will help you. What's amusing is when you don't have problems, when you don't have any bugs in production. Well, you will have them no matter what, but you know what I mean. And now let's go to the use.py. So that's the last file, and that's the biggest problem in Django. And there is a problem with that problem. There is a problem with that issue, is that when we have that problem in Django, and a lot of people don't even consider that a problem. When we have that problem in Django, it only appears after a long period of time. So what does that mean? That means that if you have ever used Django, Django, Flask, Fast API, Socket, whatever, if you have ever talked to the database, then you have that problem. So what is that problem in Django? When we are talking about database, again, that's the biggest problem. And the worst part is that a lot of people don't even consider that a problem. They think like, that's not the problem, everybody does that. And a lot of people on YouTube, on Udemy, everywhere, in Coursera, edX, they use or they make those mistakes in their projects everywhere, because a lot of people don't even consider that a problem. And I remember like a year ago when I was looking through my feed and I saw common Django developer errors or mistakes. I thought, okay, I can read that article. I clicked on the link, and I know maybe the third problem is that problem that I'm going to tell you about right now. And I was very happy that a lot of people, or some people, really think of that as a problem. So yeah, when you see that problem in the article, you know that the writer, the creator of that article, knows what he or she is doing. So yeah, what's the problem? Let me just show you. For example, get all products u, okay, product objects all like that. Product objects all, let's import it. Yeah, so what is the problem right here? You can say render, but yeah, okay, let's use render. Yeah, we don't. Of course, there is a problem with render, with other things, like that's not the working code. But what's the problem with product objects all? Aside from optimization, we imagine that we optimize that query, that everything's alright. But what's the problem with product objects all? Well, the problem is that we make that query directly. What do I mean by that? In Django, it's a really big mistake that you make your queries inside of your views, serializers, or anywhere else except for the place that you should make them in. And that place is called services. So what is services in Django? Let me create a new file. Let's call it services. And let's go to use.py. Let me copy product objects all, and let me create a new function. It can be anything. Again, as for Django filters, yeah, Django filters, I explained that in one video. Like, not Django filters, like, you know what I mean. You can watch that video and like, you'll understand. It can be anything. It can be a class, a set of classes, it can be a function, it can be anything. But what is a service? A service is that layer between Django ORM and views, serializers, or other stuff. And why do we need that layer? For example, get all products u. Yeah, let's do it. Get all products. Let me return product objects all. like that. So instead of using product objects.o, you're telling me, Andrew, that I need to use getAllProducts. Why is that? Well, actually, let me just show you. Of course, you will not use just one URL for your products. You have a lot of URLs. So you can see what's the problem right here. We are using product objects.o in every URL, and probably you have already had that in your Django projects. But what's the real problem? Your manager comes up to you and says, we need to, for example, only show active products. What you're doing? You are sitting for 5 hours and changing, testing everything that it works as expected with not product objects.o, but with product objects filter, and then is active as true. So you don't have that one place when you really can tweak your ORM queries. And again, it can be everything. Your file systems, your file storage, your I don't know, your Excel, your analytics, everything should be put into different different services. Because even if you have like 10,000 views, but you use getAllProducts like that, getAllProducts, but you have 10,000 views. Okay, no problem. You want me to what? Add a field, or you want me to use filter is active? No problem. Filter is active equals true. Everything works. You don't even need to test. Okay, you need to test that everything works, but yeah, everything works. You just literally changed one line. What if, for example, Django ORM decides to throw an exception if we don't have anything in filter, as they do it in get? So in get, when you don't find anything, we throw an exception, and they can do it for the filter. And if you want to, for example, you don't want to change your code everywhere because you have exceptions. You need to use try, except, even if you use not even, but if you are using product directly, so not product but any module directly, then you need to change that. So you need to change your queries. You need to put try, except, try, except, try, except. But if you're using services, literally try, except, you can do whatever you want. You can return none, you can return product objects none, as they do it right now in Django, but you can do anything that you want. Logging. Put your logging right here. Everything is logged. Every time you get your products, you have a log entry. And you can reuse that service inside of other services. For example, you have analytics. getAllProducts in analytics, maybe you'll find it useful. So when you're using services, you'll really just split your ORM queries. ORM queries are the main problem, because not a lot of projects, well, it's really specific for projects to have, not specific, but to have analytics for their users, to have Excel, to have PDF files, for example, but use services, always use services. Never make ORM queries, never use open function inside of your views. That's by the way another big part in my course. So yeah, a lot of things repeat from that course, but really I explained it in details, and I showed you how to really I showed you what is the solution for those problems. And another thing in Django is when you use functional views. So the problem with functional views is that they are functions. When we're talking about class, so in Django we have class views. So get all products view. What is great about that is that you have inheritance, you have, how do I say it, polyformism, I really don't know. So when you have virtual functions, so not virtual functions, how do I say it, when you have a function, when you can replace one function with another in different classes, so you know what I mean. Polyformism, I literally forgot the word. In Russian it's polyformism, but I forgot how to say it in English. But when you can reassign your functions dynamically, so you have inheritance, encapsulation in some form in Python, and you can reassign your functions dynamically. So you have a lot of great stuff. And of course, those are classes. You can have different methods, different helper functions. You can have all of your, for example, your CRUD, create, read, update, delete, in one class. That's really beneficial. And yeah, you can only use functional views when you really can justify why do you need them. But typically using class view is better. I only use Django functional views when I need to put something simple. For example, I have a health checking app that will send ping to my Django every second. And if I want to have, for example, status URL, what I can do is use status as URL and put a simple define return true in that URL. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, but typically it's better to use class views. Okay, so again, always use services, always use class views. The next problem is with the files. So when we look at the files, as you can see, I created one file right here, views.py. But typically when we're talking about files, and no, I created services.py. But typically when we're talking about files, what is the problem is that users are afraid, or people who use Django are afraid to create new files. Why? Because they think that if they have views.py, then they need to put ORM, analytics, logging, responses, yes, but yeah, everything. They need to put everything inside of their views.py. If they, for example, have models.py, I will put validators, signals, models, managers, everything inside of my models.py. It's really beneficial for you to have different files. And by the way, a little advice. It's not a problem again, it's an advice. If you have, or if you're using Django, what you want to do is use plural form of your file in your file names. Because if you have models, apps, admin is an exception, as well as manage.py, views, tests, then it's probably better to use services, not service. Yeah, but that's just better for naming. It's just an advice. But typically you need to split your project into different files, your app into different files. For example, you have models, signals, validators, services, and you can even have different folders, but don't make too many files and too many folders, because yeah, that's not great either. But try to use try to really split your files using the logic and the aims of different functions and classes. So what you can do is think that in 5 days your project will have not 1 or 2 functions related to the analytics, but 12,000 functions or 100 functions. And then what you can do is split your services. So again, you know that you need to put analytics inside of services. So what you can do is put folder services, then for example models or databases, or not databases but models, products, for example, I know some database interfaces, and then you have analytics. So different files for different services, you can even put different files for models. It's not a common practice because Django uses migrations, so Django looks for models.py files inside of every app to make migrations. But yeah, you can split whatever you want. For example, views, API views, admin views, a lot of possibilities for that. Okay, so that is another problem with Django. One thing that I want to add about database, because it's open, is that you need to know your database. Because Django is just an ORM, and optimization techniques are maybe different for every database. For example, in Oracle we have hints for the SQL queries that make them execute faster or help them execute faster. But in Postgres, for example, we don't have hints. So that's maybe different in your database. So really know your database. Get an advice from your DBA, get an advice from your fellow programmer who really knows how to use databases and how to work with that. But yeah, really just learn databases. Yeah, that's one thing that will help you with Django ORM and databases in general. Okay, so the next problem that I want to talk about is not as common, but it's not as related to Django as other problems, but those are common ones. First of all, if you're using debug in production, a lot of times I saw that a lot of projects use debug in production. So there is an extension on GitHub called xadmin or xadmin, somehow like that, and it's just a visual wrapper for your admin. So I wanted to add analytics to my Django project, but I didn't want to make any other, like for example Prometheus, Grafana, Elastic, and other like Zabbix. I didn't want to add other tools for analytics, and I wanted to have analytics inside of my admin panel. So I looked through GitHub for projects and I found Xadmin. I thought, oh, Xadmin, it's really great. It adds some cool CSS, some cool graphs, some cool things to your admin page. But when I pressed on the demo website of Xadmin, what I saw that they had debug on. So in production, they had, well, it's not production, but you know what I mean. In a showcase of their app, they had debug turned on. And after that, I immediately changed my mind, so I didn't want to use that extension anymore. Why? Because what if those people who wrote that extension had some problems with anything? So the bug is true for them. What if they don't know about other stuff in Django? For example, query optimization. What if they don't know about that? I don't know, logging. What if they don't know about that? Well, it's a trivial problem, but you know what I mean. They may have problems because those people have the bug turned on in production. Yeah, so yeah, I don't want to start a war with Xadmin. It's a great... Yeah, I'm just saying that. You have debug in production. Maybe you had debug in production because you tested something, but still. That's debug in production. That's why I didn't want to use their extension. But it's really a good one, yeah. It's really beautiful admin page, so yeah, maybe then they don't have anything. Maybe the person who is responsible for their site deployment somehow... yeah, we are people, we tend to make mistakes, so I don't want to start a war. Understand what I mean? Okay, so the next problem, the first problem is the bug. The next problem is not how do I say it correctly? So when you have a bad web server, what do I mean by bad web server? When your web server does not work. For example, a lot of Django projects have their admin page open, and a lot of projects in general that don't think about security have their admin page open. What's the problem? If I, as a hacker, can access admin page without any HTTPS so password, HTTP password before I can write my Django password. So of course I have my Django user, but if I can't have like another layer, for example, I can connect only through VPN connection. How, as a hacker, can I know what IP addresses are allowed on that web server? I cannot know it, but if admin page is open for anybody, or other pages like Grafana, Prometheus pages are open to anybody, what I can do? First of all, I can see that that's Django. And as a hacker, if I want to break your website, what I can do is use some techniques. So for example, Google for Django problems. If you don't know that Django has a bug, a security warning almost every month, every day. Yeah, that's a big problem, but that's great because we find those problems. We don't just, like, those problems don't just float around. We find them and we remove them. And that's why with every version, Django is better and better. But there is a problem that if we as programmers don't know our web servers, don't know or we have anything open, so somehow we tell the hacker something. For example, our web server version, for example, Apache version. If we tell our hacker that we have Nginx or Apache, if we tell him that we have Django, it's really the security thing, but still Django is related to that as well. So if we have something open, we don't have that layer, then we expose ourselves. So our hacker can literally, if we have our admin page open, what I can do if we don't have failed to ban. So ban by IP addresses if some statement occurs. So for example, I have more than 3 requests in admin page in 1 second, or I have some suspicious activity on admin page. If I don't have failed to ban, and I'm sure a lot of projects don't have failed to ban, so that's just a utility that will ban by your IP address. Then, of course, what I can do is I can literally just open a Django, open an admin page, and write a script or use other tools that will try to guess the password of the admin. And after that, what I can do is I can go to the admin. If my password is correct, go to the admin, use whatever I want, do whatever I want, and make everyone's life worse. Yeah, but that's the problem with web servers, not with Django, but still it's related. So if you're putting anything inside of the, putting anything out in production, try to make it as secure as possible. But that's for the security, but Django is related to that as well, because I saw a lot of projects, a lot of Django projects with open admins, with debug and other things in production. Okay, the next problem is about repetition. So when you repeat things that you should never repeat. For example, if you want to create queues for your database, so you want to create a queue data structure for your database, I'm sure that every single database, even some, I don't know, even SQLite, I'm sure that all of the databases have modules for the queues inside of those databases. If you, for example, want to create your own ORM, why do you need to create your own ORM? You have Django ORM. You can change it to another ORM if you want, to PV, to, I don't know, SQL Alchemy if you want. Why do you want it? I don't know, but you can do it. You don't need to write your own ORM. You don't need to write SQL queries inside of your views. Let me say it like that. Yeah, that's really, really bad if you do that. But don't repeat. Just don't repeat your code. Try to look for the solution in GitHub, because on GitHub, on PyPy, on GitHub, on GitLab, anywhere in the internet, because 99% of the cases that you think about as unique were already solved by somebody. Queues as well, because when you have your own data structures inside of your database that are not the part of that database. For example, if you have arrays, that's normal for some databases, but if you have I don't know, queues for some databases and your queues are your own creation, maybe that's bad, because there are a lot of things to consider. However, try to look for the solution in the internet, and after that, if you didn't find anything, or if you didn't find anything that suits you, you only after that can make your own solutions. Because why do you need to code if something has been already coded for you? Yeah, so the next problem is the lack of the libraries. And there are two problems. First of all, the lack of the libraries, and then the big amount of the libraries. So a lot of libraries in your Django projects. So why is that bad? Because if you have two little libraries, for example, you have one or two libraries, so two dependencies in your Django project, that's really bad. Because maybe you're using some stuff that you can copy from other people. So not copy from other people, but use from other people. Use a library, a module that you can install with Django. However, if you have and if you have two little not so much libraries, then of course you write redundant code, you copy yourself, you do the things that again you should not do, because other people have already implemented that, and maybe they implemented it better than you. I'm not saying that you are worse, better than me, better than anybody, because their project was designed to fight that specific issue. Your project was not designed to make something that was already implemented. That's normal. You don't, for example, use dictionaries as databases in Django because you have databases. They were designed to work with the data. Dictionaries were designed to store data in some specific manner. They were not designed to store the data on disk. So yeah, use the tools that are right for your development, and don't use very little amount of libraries and modules. But don't use a lot of libraries and modules, because if you have tons of dependencies, then it is really hard for you to move to the next version of your project. For example, if you have one, I don't know how, well, it depends on the project again, but if you have a lot of dependencies for everything, then maybe you have a lot of bugs, because every library is a potential bug. If you're writing your own code, then you first of all test your own code. You typically don't test libraries, and second of all, you know what you're doing. So at least you, the one who wrote that code, or your team, know that okay, there may be that place can contain a bug, but we know how to fix it because we wrote that code. You didn't write a library, and yeah. That's it. So the second problem is with a lot of dependencies is that it's really hard to you. It will be really complicated for you to update or upgrade your Django version, because if you have Django version, for example, 1, and you have tons of dependencies for that version, maybe 50%, 60%, 70% of those dependencies were not updated to the next version. So for example, their authors deserted them. They don't have those things, they don't support those things anymore. So for example, library A is for Django version 1 only, and you can use it with Django version 4, which will come out soon. So that means that your project will always stay on Django version Django version number 1. And that's bad because, again, Django has, if we're talking about security, yes, security is really important, and if we're talking about security, Django has a lot of security issues that were fixed from version number 1. That's one problem. The second problem is that your code is old. It's a legacy code right now. It's not convenient for you to write any new code. It's not fun. It's not amusing. You want to quit your job. You want to stop programming. All those problems because you have a lot of dependencies, and you can't simply upgrade your Django project to the newest version possible. Okay, so that is I think that's the last problem. Yeah, so a lot of stuff was explained today. What I can add is that if you have 51 minutes of, oh my god, what I want to add is that if you have some code that you run always, for example, you have a specific admin creation. For example, you need to send an email to your admin, then you have two-factor authentication for your admin page. Of course, that's great, but a little advice. Maybe you should look into Django manage.py commands, because what you can do is write your own commands for your manage.py file in Django. It's really nice, so yeah, you can do it. And yeah, that's what I wanted to tell you today. Other problems may contain like bad admin page, but yeah, just actually learn, because if you have those problems, that means that you have something, and if you don't understand that you have those problems, that means that you have something to develop, to improve. And I think that's great. So yeah, if you know that you have problems, mistakes, errors, of course that's bad, and you doubt yourself, you doubt yourself, everybody does that. But if you fix those problems, I don't think that that's a problem, because even my GitHub account, in my public repositories, I have, for example, secret keys exposed. I have the bug in some variables in raw variables, not inside of environment variables. I have raw views without any services. I have a lot of problems, but I am trying to fix them. And if you will try to fix them as well, then maybe it will be beneficial for you. So yeah, that's a really, really long video, and yeah, that's kind of what my course is all about. Yeah, so that's, yeah, a really long video actually. But yeah, that's my course talks about those problems in programming itself. So if you are not working with Django, then my course is great for you as well, because yeah, that was, well, actually, if you're not working with Django and you have been watching me for 50 minutes, thank you first of all, but then what you're doing? Like, if you don't know Django, what have you been listening to? But like, okay, thank you. Thanks to everybody actually who watched to that moment. But if you, yeah, so that's actually what everything that I want to say. It's, yeah, it's really great to have such a great framework, and I have other Django optimization videos in the future. So thank you for the watching, and as always, good luck.